Welcome to the webinar. As you trickle in, please know that you are most welcome to this next video in our RSI series, our fourth video in the Remote Simultaneous Interpreting series hosted by Cross Cultural Communications, featuring today Giovanna Carriero Contreras of Denver and of Chesco Linguistic Services. I am your host, Marjorie Bancroft. I will be behind the scenes most of the time, but I'm here not only to welcome you, but to introduce with very, very special pleasure. This particular speaker is a friend of mine, as well as a colleague in the field and one of our trainers and illustrious authors of two of our textbooks. Giovanna is here to speak to you on a subject that is dear to our hearts at Cross-Cultural Communications, remote simultaneous interpreting for schools and community services. Why? Because Cross-Cultural Communications is the leading national agency for community and medical interpreter training. And we have been in existence almost 20 years and are absolutely specialized in this particular area. I am Marjorie Bancroft, again, the director and founder of CCC, as we call it for short. And we are hosting this series of free webinars since COVID began, because interpreters are switching massively to remote interpreting in general, including remote simultaneous interpreting. Up until now, the RSI series, the Remote Simultaneous Interpreting series, has focused on either general RSI or RSI for conference interpreting or court and legal interpreting, or, you know, specialized interpreting in those, shall we say, more elite areas. This particular webinar is entirely devoted to schools, interpreting simultaneously and remotely in schools, and community services. So without further ado, I'm actually going to pass the baton along to Giovanna. She will be reserving 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So please, if you have questions for Giovanna, would you kindly write them down in the Q&A and reserve the Q&A for those questions, and chat if you have questions for CCC or questions about certificates, which will not be mailed to you. You will get them directly sent. A link will be sent to you 24 hours after the recording of this webinar. At the end of this webinar, or 24 to 48, but usually 24 hours, you will get the link to this webinar and a link to your certificate. And this is a reminder that only participants who attend live can get a certificate. No one else will receive a certificate. Also, as a reminder, 2 weeks from today, the last presentation in our RSI series, which will be on medical interpreting for remote simultaneous interpreting, will be taking place at the same time, and you will automatically get a link to register for that by attending this one. So now, Giovanna, I will leave you to introduce yourself, and hope you have a wonderful time with our participants. Take care. We'll see you again at Q&A.
Thank you, Marjorie. I will see you in about 14 minutes. And hello to everybody. I am really, really happy to greet you this morning or this afternoon. And I see from the chats that you are joining from all over. Beside a number of states in here in the USA, we also have participants from Italy, my home country, Paraguay, Spain, and anybody else coming in. I still see you joining. Thank you and good morning. I would like to get into our presentation right away. There is a lot to say, and I would like to leave enough time for question and answers. So let me share my screen and go to our presentation to get us started. Marjorie, or can you just confirm that everything is good and everybody, it looks visible on your side? That would be great.
Looks wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's get started. Do you need a Fiat or a Cadillac? If you love cars, so let's see what we're going to buy today or not. And This is a session on remote simultaneous interpreting specifically for schools, and that message can be extended also to other community events for other fields. My name is Giovanna Carriero Contreras. A little bit about me for those that do not know me. I am a graduate from the School of Interpreting and Translation in Geneva, Switzerland. And as Marjorie said, I am one of the co-authors and licensed trainers for the Community Interpreter Program, trainer of trainers, and other trainings. I am a member of the US ASTM committee, as well as the chief of delegation for the US group for the what is called the TC37 SC5 at the ISO organization, the International Organization for Standards. And I will mention a little bit of this as we go through the presentation. The most important thing that you need to know is that I am a passionate advocate for the interpreting profession. Go interpreters, go, 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 let's get together. One voice, one message, one profession to raise the bar of our services. And for full disclosure, I'm also the CEO of a language company, which sometimes makes me walk on a very difficult path because they look at me as a selling services rather than someone that wants to really contribute to the profession by providing the correct information about services. Without further ado, let's get to where we are today. And just like in a scary fairy tale, we one day woke up as something had completely changed. Actually, the world as we knew it completely changed. And COVID-19 knocked on our doors and said, you stay home. Everything completely changed on us. Today, this webinar will cover an overview in interpreting in educational settings. And for full disclosure, this is particularly focused on the setting as we know it in the US. However, I hope that from around the world, you can get information and apply it to whatever reality you're living through right now. And we're gonna look a little bit what was before and during COVID. And now all of a sudden we hear these remote simultaneous interpreting in educational settings. And this remote is like the new words, the new buzz. Everybody is now talking about remote. We also get exposed to new terminology that somehow was not really part of 100% of our daily routine. VCI, RSI, VRI, OPI, what is that? We're gonna get our terminology straight. And then we're going to understand what is an RSI platform. What is it? I mean, we have been going out and learning so much and so many new details about this remote. Let's see what that means for us. We're also going to cover throughout the entire presentation without anything in particular, but everything everywhere throughout the next 40 minutes. What are the adjustments that we as practitioners need to make, not only for us to grow into this, our new role, but also to educate our colleagues, our peers, those that look at us to provide additional information, but also those that we work with, whether you are an independent contractor educating your client or a staff interpreter educating your team and your leadership in the school settings in the district where you work. We are all out for adjustments to be made. And also we are going to talking about two big elephants in the room. And again, this is going to be spread all across the presentation, this conversation today. We do know that we are running against budgetary issues as well as logistical limitations. So where we're going from now will be kind of open conversation, and we'll see where that will lead us. Interpreting in educational settings. What was life before COVID? Well, we interpreters at schools mostly worked on site. We delivered our services in consecutive mode, side translation, simultaneous, consecutive. One speaker speaks, they pause, we interpret, and the flow goes on the same way as in a conversation. Side translation, we have a number of documents that we will orally render when we read the written content, and simultaneous when we engage in interpreting at the same time as the speaker is presenting to their audience. The most we knew about remote, as in distance, was OPI, over the phone interpreting. The family can be on the other side, or the interpreter can be on the other side, the different locations, and through a 2-3-way calls, we are providing interpreting services. And I say 2 or 3 because the parties can be in 2 or 3 locations. And if the interpreter is the one remote, then you have 2 locations. All of a sudden, online, remote, those become the words of the day. Online, why? Well, everything goes online because the schools shut down. The schools completely close their doors, and all of a sudden the students need to deal with learning online, and so are the teachers and the entire administrative staff. All of a sudden, the other buzzword that we knew was remote. Now everybody needs to remotely providing services. All right, so what does that mean for us? Keep calm and bye-bye interpreter. We are no longer on site. There is nobody on site to interpret for. Mind you, I know and you know that this is extremely due to health reasons. So before we move on, I would like to really learn a little bit about you, and let's go with the first poll. The first poll will be about having me an understanding on how many of you have actually attended previous presentations. So allow me to unshare for a second and start the poll. I'm launching the first poll. If you can please look at your screen, you should now have your poll, and you can please start answering questions. I see voting coming in. Again, this is to know how many of you have attended previous webinars in this series. Few more seconds to go. All right, I am giving a few more seconds. I think we have a good picture. So, oh, things are trickling in. All right, I'm gonna close the poll. And I can share the results. And now you see that we have at least on average, an average of 50 to 52% have attended the previous seminar. Very good. Let me reshare my screen now. And let's restart. So with this in mind, if you have attended already previous seminars, I would highly suggest that you go and watch them all. They each have a very important information, and I decided, because we have so much to present today, I decided not to go really deeply into what has already been shared by my colleagues. So please do not miss that opportunity. Now that we have finished our poll, let's talk about what happened after COVID. Reactive, proactive, you know better than me that reactive is when we engage in a behavior that responds pretty quickly to something that is happening. And that reactive response can be adequate, insufficient, inappropriate, appropriate, halfway complete, etc. And then proactive is that type of behavior that allows us to plan ahead for what is happening. Well, we reactively try to decide what we proactively could do. When schools shut down in the United States, we had a complete halt to anything and everything that was related to interpreting in school settings. And based on my direct experience, the interpreters that were working as staff collaborated, worked together with their leadership to create solutions. How we're going to do this. At the very beginning, there was a lot of panic because truly we did not know whether we were going back to school the next day, the next week, the next month, and actually we ended up not returning to school. So it's a moment where we all started thinking, what shall I do? What shall I do? What shall I do? And all of us brought different ideas to the table. And when I say to all of us, all the stakeholders that were involved. We had interpreters, freelancers, language companies, brainstorming with leadership in district schools and schools, charter schools, magnet schools, you name them. We all tried to come up with what we can do. And what we were able to go was into best we can mode. We need to do whatever we can at best with the resources that we have. Again, remember, budget limitations, but also logistics limitations. Very, 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 very little percentage of schools were equipped to even teach online, even less to give us the opportunity to interpret remotely. So this before and during COVID has been quite a journey. And during COVID at the very beginning started with a lot of panic, a lot of thinking, a lot of reactive solutions. Could we afford the peaky approach? What I mean by peaky is, we have to tell our clients that we have so many requirements and we have to uphold to so many standards, etc. Not so much so. I really honor and respect and thank all the training materials that our colleagues, conference interpreters, have put out there. If you have not had a chance, please go back to these trainings that are posted for free all over the web. Learn from them. What I thank the conference interpreting profession for is to really always call us to our highest standards and delivery of services. However, the reality is that in our field, we were working in a setting where we didn't have enough tools to work with. So we continued to work in the very first part of this COVID situation reactively. We looked out for a lot of training, and that's also a word that can be applied to anybody and everybody. Training is not only for us. For us, the hiatus from the interpreting has given us the opportunity to really attend a lot of trainings, webinars like this one, or other paid opportunities to increase and develop and better our skills. However, training is only in the sense of educating our clients and the teams that we work with. We have to deal with the notion of a new work environment. How do we do this shift? Because what has happened is that in that soon after COVID, on-site interpreters that were primarily working on site now need to learn new tricks. And they need to reinvent and update their toolbox. They need to learn what means working from home. Technology and security have been issues that we very limitedly worked with. And what is going to happen now after COVID? A number of these questions have been answered in a document that was published by the IT work group. If you have not heard of the group, please, please, please go to this website, www.iteworkgroup.org. This is the newly formed, is a very young group of translators and interpreters in education. We are a group of volunteers that came together. We have had already several meetings, and please look at the history. It's described and on our website. But one of the groups working with the larger group, created a document regarding best practices to work remotely in educational settings, and that document can be downloaded for free. Again, if you go to the website, you scroll down the page where you can, this is where you can get the document. And the document addresses whether you are working, delivering consecutive or simultaneous services. But let's go into what happened, right? So schools are shut down, and they do have a need to communicate with their families. And there were also a number of nonprofit organizations that do a lot of work supporting the school districts. And we worked with one in particular that gave us a very good opportunity to test run new solutions. So this is when the fairy tale began. A nonprofit organization is meeting to support parents through the challenges that COVID disruption has created. They have a need for one language at first, then it grows up to 7 languages. So the situation is they support parents how to adapt to the new environment, how to cope with the fact that they may be out of work, they may be essential workers needing to go to work and they have the kids at home. They even have to get equipped to homeschool their kids. Connectivity and technology was an issue for a lot of families and for a lot of schools as well. Not every family had a computer for their kids. Not every family has internet connection good enough to support the learning via an iPad, a computer, etc. So these were other type of challenges that the leadership at schools also needed to learn. So how are we going to do this? So what was set up was I'm going to start using some terminology, a video conferencing platform that is traditionally used to have meetings where you meet with people in other locations, language to language, same language. I am here, you are in Maryland, you are in Paraguay, send you a link, we all get on and we have a nice conversation in English. Now the problem is that some of my parents are Spanish speakers, so then we had the 7 languages. It grew to Nepali, Somali, Burmese, Karen, and a few more. How do we do that? We had to set up all different phone lines in order for the families to listen into the interpreting. We had to set up instructions to let them know that the phone line was available for them to listen into the interpreter. And we also had to train our interpreters. Where are the interpreters going to be? How are they going to have enough equipment? So what also happened at the very beginning in the world where I lived, in my little world, is that we started training interpreters that were used to do only on-site from the get-go. The very first week we organized online trainings for interpreters so that we could at least have them work from home. And obviously with that, there was a huge screening process. People started learning what they had, what they did not have, and you know very well that once they started ordering online, the inventory went low on a number of things, headset to start with, very, very, very quickly. So what happened during one of these meetings? We got Zoom bombed. All of a sudden, somebody hacked in, and the experience was very unpleasant. The group may have not been very supportive of the work that we were doing, and the organization was extremely, extremely quick in answering. They completely shut the link down for the video conference platform, and they turned their filming and streaming via Facebook. Now what happens? That we had to redirect the 7 languages. So there is always, it's always important to have a support for things that may happen. We had to quickly connect with 7 to 15 interpreters and redirect them on the link with Facebook, and have also the families connected via Facebook. So talking about reactively being proactive, that was really something that was done in the, I think it took us maybe 3 to 4 minutes to get back online. Another experience that we also went through, it was graduation time. Graduation time here in the United States is really big. The functions for people to graduate, for students to graduate, are awesome, and they go out of, they go the extra mile. The schools go the extra miles to honor the class of students that graduates that year. So graduation time, class 2020, we love you. We're sorry we couldn't have your party for what is going on, but we wish you the best. And what happened here? We have two creative solutions that were brought up. And one was a drive-in. Um, some schools had very large parking lots. They organized the streaming of the presentation to honor the students, and the families were participating into the graduation with from their car, basically, exactly as you see in the first picture. What happens there is, because everything was happening outside, there were two teams of interpreters. There were teams on the ground doing one part of interpreting, and there was another team that was in an home office to handle the second part of the streaming. Obviously, we also had backup. And the other format is the virtual, what I call the virtual booth setup. Some of the schools that were used to have graduations in very large settings, like a coliseum, like a theater, they were already used to the idea of having a booth, a full booth or a tabletop, and interpreters being in their booth with their headset, the console available, etc. For them, doing the switch to a virtual booth, which is a remote simultaneous platform, which we're going to describe a little bit more in a little bit, was not that hard, and they were already ready to the financial cost. So that was done very streamlined, and with the features that I'm going to talk about in a second. I already introduced some of these definitions. I already talked about RSI. I already talked about VCI. What are these? So the definitions that you have now on the screen they are listed in the document that I suggested you download from the IT group website. And the over-the-phone interpreting, we are mostly familiar with. The participants connect through an audio line, a phone line, and the interpreter interprets consecutively. One speaker speaks at a time, and the interpreter interprets when they pause. The video remote interpreting is when the interpreter, but also the other participants, can be connected through a video platform that is designed for multilingual communication. So we're talking about a platform for video where that it was created, that it has been created specifically for multilingual purposes. What happened with all these VRI platforms? That they were working very well for 2 locations. Now everybody is in a different location. So when we came to 3 locations, parents in one a home, and teachers at their home, and the interpreter at their home, that didn't work. And so what are we going to use? That's where we introduced the idea of video conference interpreting. So these are video conference platforms, exactly as I described before. We participants join together and we have a conversation, we have a meeting. Now we have the interpreter, and the interpreter is the one that interprets every time the speaker pauses. So talking about additional skills, we're going to talk about this as well. There is a different way to manage skills online that is completely different from a from what we're used to do on site. If we have to even stop or remind someone to pause when we are on site, a little gesture with our hand, even very subtle, very little, or very discreet, can be seen. Not so much on screen. And I do realize that you see my hand a lot, and please forgive me. I'm very expressive when I'm passionate about what I present. So video conference interpreting is basically been an accommodation, an adjustment that we have done to proactively provide the services in a very reactive situation. Then we get slowly introduced in educational settings to the idea of remote simultaneous interpreting. Mind you what I said before, the video booth, the virtual video booth that we did with the graduation, that was remote simultaneous interpreting. Remote simultaneous interpreting is specifically when the interpreter speaks at the same time as the participant, but now we use a platform that has a dedicated channel so that participants can hear us through the same platform on a different channel, enjoying the passion of the speaker in first language, while they enjoy the type of presentation coming through the screen. Again, you can download these documents from our website at www.itworkgroup.org. And if you scroll down, then you have the link to download the document. Time for our poll number 2. So let me do this very quickly. Maybe I don't need to stop sharing, but I did. Poll. Here you have it. And please, you should see now on your screen, you can start voting. Uh-oh, you're not, attendees are now viewing. I am going to end the poll. And for the sake of time, please be ready to also do a second poll. I will tell you the results in a second, but you can very quickly glance at it. And now you should be able to see poll number 3. All right, I am now ending the poll. Share the results. So let me share my screen again. So for the sake of time, I am just going to summarize for you that the majority has used, has been engaged in interpreting services that were delivering consecutive services, and a very good chunk of you have also interpreted in simultaneous meetings, and this, this the great majority uses Zoom, and then you have been exposed to WebEx and Google Hangouts, Google Meeting, etc. Now, on this, sorry, on this screen, you can see a very little representation of the video conference interpreting. Video conference interpreting has been used for meetings since COVID started. Now, when we get to remote simultaneous interpreting, not many of you have been exposed to the real platforms. Most of you have still worked on GoToMeetings, Cisco WebEx, some Skype. Very little, 7% of those that voted used the streaming process that I described before in the drive-in. But a lot of you have used Zoom, which I think means that you have used the language feature. Now, what happens here? We go from VCI, and we go and use the VCI together with a phone line, and we do streaming and phone interpreting. Now, a lot of us start using Zoom. Zoom made a very affordable choice to a number of our encounters. So we are going to start using more and more. At the beginning, the language feature was not very known. There was still the interpreter joining in as a participant, but now we discovered the feature, and then we're going to use it as simultaneous interpreting. And then the real remote simultaneous interpreting platforms make their way through. What happens here? The panorama, the landscape becomes really, really busy. And it feels like going to a parking lot. If you are like me, when you want to buy a new car, I have a lot of wants, a lot of wish, but guess what? I need to settle for the need. I look at the Cadillac and I see, yeah, it's really nice and cool. The Fiat, well, it takes me to work, it takes me home, and I choose the Fiat. Is that really bad? The problem is that when it comes down to choices, I also have to consider that the elephant in the room is my budget. And if I don't have the budget to pay for the most expensive platforms, I have to settle. But settling does not mean that we always find the cheapest solution. I want to have the Lightning McQueen type of approach. If you have seen the movie Cars, and I want to find the right solutions, and I want to work with teams. So what happens? The good old days of simultaneous interpreting in schools is gone. We are exposed to these meetings in board meetings, community meetings, parent-teacher organization meetings, graduations, orientations, back to school night, and generally speaking, any type of meeting that required the speaker to address an audience. We were used to use the portable equipment, and we're also used for some more complex situation to tabletop and the full booth in some locations. Well, now all of this is gone. So what happens? We'll get introduced to the RSI. What is an RSI platform? Well, is a solution that is designed exclusively from the get-go, and that's the difference with the video conference platforms, for the need of multilingual purposes. And so when we look at the platform, is a cloud-based platform that wants to replicate the idea of a booth on site. The interpreters that deliver these services before COVID were either working from a studio, and so they were going to a hub, or they were going even on a remote other type of location. Now we all work from home. And so we had to adjust with a virtual booth, floor channel, backend built with interpreters and IT support. We have to start. And if you have not yet, please educate yourself, get informed, because we need to get familiar with all these pieces. Now, what are the perspectives from a client? What are the features from a client perspective that we want to educate those that we work with from? The client, and you see in this picture, everybody has their own view, right? How many pictures do you see here? That's a quiz that we can do later. First of all, the client will want to know, how do I look at the platform? How does this happen? What is the dashboard? Do I have share screens, messaging, documents upload? All the video conferencing platform have these features. Do the RSI platforms have it? Yes, they do. What you want to discuss with your clients that they want to think of, what is the format of my event? How many participants am I going to have? How many languages I'm going to run? And how many participants or viewers I need to have for these meetings. So this is a screenshot that comes from Kudo, which is a remote simultaneous platform. And you see that all the features that I have mentioned, they're right here on the right side at the bottom. And here at the bottom left corner, you have the selector for the languages. This is the screen that your team, your clients will see as either a participant, a facilitator to the meeting. Now, this is a different, and I'm sorry that it is a blurred image. This is a screenshot from what another RSI platform, Voice Boxer, looks like. Again, you have all the icons here for the video conferencing tools, the messaging, the chat, raise your hand, and at the bottom, you are broadcasting the mute and unmute button. And then here in the middle at the bottom, you have a selector for your language. All of these features, you need to know them because you need to talk to your clients and your teams knowledgeably enough. When can be used? Well, like I said, with every single meeting that we were doing in person, remote simultaneous can happen. However, you need to be very specific and very familiar about the characteristics of the platform. So the education and the training piece in learning about all this is important. So what's the big deal? If I was doing on site, why I cannot do it online? Well, it is a big deal. Are you really serious? First of all, in an online meeting, we have to toggle between multiple participants. If facilitator is not going to do a good job, I have only 2 ears to hear and 1 mouth to speak. If I cannot hand it over to my client, to my partner really quickly, I am going to do a running after the speakers. The topic can be very challenging. The possible Q&A, if I am in a remote simultaneous channel, how am I going to open to Q&A session? And then the pace of the speakers. I really feel it for someone that shouldn't, if someone was interpreting me at this point. Now, what are the downsides? Well, we have a limited ability to interact with speakers. We have a limited ability to coordinate with partner, and the technology requires a lot of multitasking. So from our standpoint, from the interpreter standpoint, these are all the features that we would like to see. A dedicated interface to interpreters, the language selection, mute and unmute button, video stream directly from the floor. I want to see what happens because that visual is very important to me, as well as the quality of the sound. And then the ability to do relay. If I go from English, if I go to Quiche to Spanish and from Spanish to English, I do have a need for relay. And then how do I pass it over to my colleague, the handover? This is an image of how it looks like from an interpreter standpoint when I work on the remote simultaneous platform. And you can see all the features that I just described, mute and unmute, the presentation slide. And at the bottom, you should have all this information for your handover, for your microphone. An important function that you find on all of them is the setup of the outgoing channel and the ingoing channel. The outgoing is what you're going to interpret into. The incoming is what you're listening from, which is the floor, which is the language that the speaker is presenting. Now, something really quickly, and then I think I'm going to stop here for the sake of having questions, is the ergonomics. Please do not undermine the ability to create your own space at home for your own office. If you look at the presentations in these webinars that have been provided, there are extensive information about this. You need to also be technology savvy. your Ethernet cable has to be the one that you should hook up so that you do not suffer from Wi-Fi. You need to learn how to do your speed internet check. Is your internet speed strong enough for what you need to do? Test, 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 test all your devices before you get into. We started a meeting where the headset where the microphone of our interpreter created acoustic shock, and hopefully we did that through a test run. Now, what are the considerations that we have to make about better condition, working conditions? I am highlighting them all here. And I am going to talk about one thing in particular that has not been discussed yet. Zoom gloom, you have it in other webinars. It's same as the missing partner syndrome. Oh, I cannot see my partner when I team work. How do I do the handover well enough? Well, the cognitive load has also been discussed. It's very taxing, but ladies and gentlemen, we also have to make sure that we think of ourselves and our occupational hazards. Looking at the screen, it can create problems in our vision. The posture that we're having, now we're seated so much more than what we were sitting before, and hearing damage risk that we are exposed to. So educating yourself about how to prevent issues that can come from occupational hazards of this type is paramount. How do you educate your boss or client? Well, first of all, assess the needs, get trained, learn about all these different opportunities, and present alternatives. Request a test drive with everybody. You don't want to have unexpected results at the moment of the meeting. Have a backup plan. If you drop the call, let them know, I am coming right back. Technology may fail. Remember what happened about the Zoom bombing? There was a backup plan, and we didn't know about it. We reactively worked on that, but you may want to think now. We have had enough time to think what worked and what doesn't work. Establish a communication process. And information sharing process is very important. Where are you going to get the information that you need from the meeting? Who is your contact person? Also, how are the families going to be informed about this? Is there something that has been translated? How are you going to send it out? How are the families going to connect? Do they have the registration page in their page? Keep confidentiality and privacy at all times. Do not lower the standards on that. There has been a moment where the Department of Justice in the US says, well, we're going to be laxing a little bit. Remember, if something happens, we don't want them to point the fingers at us. And please provide a best practices checklist. You can have that by downloading that program. Your checklist, your own checklist, work in a quiet place, have a professional background, proper lighting. They may not see you when you interpret simultaneously, but that's something that you want to remind your client and your participants, because you need to hear them and you need to listen to them. Business attire is anyway, you're going to have a test run, right? The positioning of the screen, if you have a screen this way or this way, it does bother also the participants as well. Keep your systems current and up to date, and note down the name and the roles of the participants. Everything is in the attitude. Please remember, when you know better, you do better. Do your best until you can. I love these quotes from Maya Angelou. Be flexible, do not lower your standards. Adapt to the situation to find solutions, don't sell yourself short. And RSI is here to stay. Even when you go back to school, be prepared, be trained. So now I thank you, especially you interpreters, because you continue making the miracle of the language access happen every day still. And here, my information if you want to contact me. But I would like to go to Q&A because we're well out of time. So I am going to stop sharing and give the floor to Marjorie to have any.
You have plenty of questions. I'm so glad that you speak fast. Thank you very much, Giovanna, but I'm going to dive right in and thank you at the end. First question. I have done multiple remote IEPs since the pandemic began, individual education plans for those of you outside the US, but always in consecutive mode, and it worked just fine. While I'm not opposed to RSI, is it just a matter of preference or really a more effective way to interpret remotely? And for those of you who don't know IPs, they're tremendously long and complicated documents and quite hard to interpret. Go ahead.
So an IP falls under the special education meetings. And thank you for bringing that up, but the IP was not listed in meetings that you should have with remote simultaneous interpreting. So you have done it consecutively, keep doing it in consecutively. I am not a huge supporter of simultaneous in that type of meeting. That is why it was not listed in the list of meetings where you want to act as a simultaneous interpreter.
Thank you. I am working remotely with a family who will soon be assigned to a therapist to help them with their child who has autism. They will need interpreting for the sessions with the therapist. Even if the therapist is willing to meet face-to-face with the child and family, I am reluctant to go in person. Do you know of situations where the interpreter works remotely while the therapist is on site?
Yes, and we also have had actually requests for the interpreter not to be on site or to just limit, and that may be one of the options that you can use as you build your case and say, maybe if you can get equipped with video, and I am going to give you all the information on how to log on the site, on the link, etc. I appear in video, and while you do your session with the child, we are aware of these situations if you do not feel comfortable to. However, you also have to be ready maybe not to provide services if they feel very strong about the interpreter being there, just because of the nature of the exercises that sometimes are needed through these therapies. Also remember that when mental health situations are involved, the component of the video, if it's a partial, can even cause more disruption than if it's complete, where everybody logs through video. So keep all these considerations in mind.
Thank you, Giovanna. Giovanna, hi. What about when my school district has decided to use Google Meet, which doesn't have a simultaneous channel? I've worked around this by creating a separate meeting with a phone number where families can call to listen to my interpretation. This is for board meetings, so I guess they want your reaction.
Please learn to build use case. There is no way to speak to leadership unless you have a very thorough checklist of this works and this doesn't work. Google Meet can be used for this, but we need another solution for these reasons. I understand that the budgetary situations and logistics limitations can be, but this is not going to happen overnight. We now have had enough experience to build at least information for you to propose. Do not give up. It may come. Sometimes we have had clients turning around after 3, 4, 5 months. And then, you have the bubble thing that says, I told you, didn't I tell you? Yeah, but I'm not going to say that to you. Thank you for choosing it. Build case scenarios and build data.
Thank you. Quick question. How did you broadcast the interpreting at the drive-in mode?
That was great. So the school put available their broadcasting, and we set them up with 3 phone lines. The interpreters on the site were interpreting into one language, and interpreters remotely were interpreting in the other language, because we were having participants that were speaking different languages. So we had the testimonials from families, and we had testimonials from the teachers, from students that wanted to honor the language of their families. So we had to do a 3-way setup in order to make that happen.
Wow, that sounds so sweet. Which equipment do you recommend for RSI?
Ooh.
Do you want to go on the record?
This is the time where I really call for your own education as professionals. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I chose. What matters are the features that I try to cover with you. Make sure that in your selection of that platform, you come to an agreement to what you can sacrifice and what you must have. So now I'm not going to make names. So you have enough on that sheet.
Okay. What resources are available for schools in low-income districts, especially with limited budget and resources? Example, no Wi-Fi bandwidth, students with no computers or internet at home, etc. How can interpreters help in this situation? Ouch.
Do you have great parking lots? You see, the idea of the drive-in for me was very cost effective because they were able to gather people. And remember that a number of these RSI platforms, even if you go with the most affordable one, may have a way to connect through phone if the school has Wi-Fi. But again, you really mentioned a lot of counter elements, right? And if they happen all together, I think that really the only thing I can think about is a big parking lot where you can have the interpreters on one side but distant from everybody else. So that's where all the social distancing, where all the good PEP practices must be observed, but at the same time it can be broadcasted through a speaker, it can be broadcasted through a main audio system from the school. The problem is that it's very difficult to give a one answer to a school that may have different issues, but you can, I will be happy to help you brainstorm, and you have my information.
This one I have to say because I can't read all the Italian, but it comes from somebody who understands you. Ciao, Giovanna. Babluki, how would you convince your school district to use Zoom for simultaneous interpretation when the district has safety issue concerns with Zoom? Grazie.
Choose another platform. I want to say something about the platforms that you're going to use, and I promised that at the beginning, and I didn't find a way to get it, so I'm going to. At the professional level, talking about standards, we do a lot of work to try to provide minimum requirements for platforms to have in order to make us deliver good quality work. Not only to deliver it, but also to receive it. Some of these platforms do not check off any of these requirements. And that means that although they can be the most affordable choice, they do have some serious concerns. So if they really are opposed to Zoom, then maybe it's time to study some other options and have your district come with a good proposal to the table and approach one of these RSI platforms and say, hey, we want to give you our business, but you need to make it easier on us, and see if they have a better way to negotiate.
Cool. If I'm hired by the school system, they typically like to set up the meetings. They are the ones who will choose the platform, right? That sort of ties into what you were just talking about.
And so talking about the cognitive load and talking about the increase in skills, I don't know if I was strong enough in my last slide. Please, please, please do not lower the bar, because the moment we allow everybody to lower our bar, there will be nobody that will gonna raise it up for us again. So what I mean by that, the fact that the client is the one providing us the link to the platform, it's something that we have to come to terms with, unless we can just have a little bit of a way in to say, I'll be happy to use that. Have you looked into XYZ? I had better results working with another client, and see if they're open to that conversation. But on the other side, unfortunately, we are being called to increase our skills even in learning. I had to work with Google Meets, Teams, and then High Five, and then Life Size, and then Blue Jeans, and then you name it. And you're thinking, how many more that I've not even been exposed to? So the short answer is yes, you can still professionally propose an alternative to look into, and is part of who we are, the professionals that we want to appear to be, to get informed and being able to be flexible and navigate these platforms. They're here to stay.
Well, I hope this question doesn't tie into lowering the bar. The question is, what are the free apps for RSI?
Yeah, that lowers the bar.
That lowers, I was afraid.
And the reality, you remember what I said about security? you know, if we, I'm thinking what lawyers are using, right? How far, how low in app are they going selling their services? Remember, once you go back, you will never be able to raise that bar, and you have given yourself away. Standards, this is not the time to give up on standards. This is the time to really remind everybody of the standards, because if we all do the same thing, we have a chance to notch it up.
Giovanna, our wonderful time with you is up. I want to thank you profusely for your passion and energy, as well as your presentation and your commitment to high standards, even facing the challenges that you clearly face interpreting and managing interpreting services in schools and in the community. We had a lot of lovely comments and thanks in chat and Q&A, and obviously more questions than we can answer. So we have to let you go. I will be staying on, as I will explain in a minute. But for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, you can send them to info at cultureandlanguage.net. We'll be happy to pass them on. And meantime, Giovanna, please enjoy the rest of your day, because you have richly earned it. And we thank you for your generosity in speaking to everyone today.
Thank you, Marjorie. And I was quickly glancing at the chat, and I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of interpreters and a lot of schools and districts that have proactively created proactive solutions. I really do. It's just that there is so much to learn that I hope that this has provided a little bit more of information to all of us.
I'm very sure it has. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day, Giovanna.
You all. Thank you.